Hello, and welcome to G140 Radio, a special arts radio show dedicated to the celebration of Gray's School of Art's 140th anniversary. Today, a season of events kicks off with a very special exhibition at Aberdeen Art Gallery, which tells the story of this institution, its people, and their work. Over the next 3 hours, we will hear about the origins of the school,
that they shall erect at my own cost on the said site a school of science and art for behoof of the community of Aberdeen.
There will be memories of being a student in the 60s.
So I'd set up the still life with every pheasant, grouse and feathered thing that I could find in the cupboard. And she looked at it and she says, well, she says, rather you than me. I wouldn't want to be taking on all these feathers.
We'll meet a new generation of artists and hear about their work for the show.
So I was kind of making like a love letter to the school, kind of drawing connections between my more contemporary video archive with the more historic photographic archive to just give a sense of what Gray's is like and just try and create something that was like a living portrait to the school.
And we will hear from the new man at Gray's, the Dean Professor Dan Allen.
Art schools across the UK have come and gone. Gray's is one of the oldest art schools in the country and is now as strong as it ever has been, in my view. So I think we should just actually recognise that that's quite an achievement.
I'm Ben Lawrenson. Welcome to G140 Radio, a programme produced and presented by journalism students from Gray's School of Art at Robert Gordon University. Gray's was founded in 1885 after the donation of money from a local businessman, John Gray. The original school was built on Schoolhill next door to the Art Gallery, which opened in the same year. And the Art Gallery is where the flagship G140 event, the exhibition, is opening right now. Joining us from there is Aisha Adebayo. Aisha, can you tell us more about what to expect this morning?
Hi, good morning. So I'm here inside the Aberdeen Art Gallery where the celebrations for Gray's School of Art at 140, they're officially kicking off. You know, it's a huge milestone for one of Scotland's most historic creative institutions. And today, people can expect, a mix of art, conversations, a real sense of homecoming for past and present students, I would say.
And how's the exhibition looking right now?
Well, it looks absolutely incredible. The exhibition is titled Never Make a Head Bigger Than a Melon. And, it brings together works from past students, current students, members of staff from across the decades. And the first thing that'll catch your eyes when you walk in is a striking marble bust, the portrait of John Gray by Henry Smith. Apparently, it was created in 1885. It's been placed so it directly overlooks the very first building of Gray's School of Art, almost like, he's watching over how far the school has come. And then everywhere you turn, there are different styles and textures. You see multi-channel video installations, constructed relief pieces made from mount boards and layered papers. You see all paintings on board, canvas, even on wood. There are more experimental works here too. Things like tin cans arranged on wooden bases. And the artists on display, they're a mix of big names who are actually, former students, even current students at Gray's. You see people like Derek Ashby's work on display, Alexander Fraser, William Cannon, many others. It really feels like, a visual timeline of Gray's creative legacy here.
And what's the programme today? Obviously, the official opening, different alumni invited, and the In Conversation event.
Can you repeat that?
What's the programme happening today? What's going on?
Yeah, right. So according to what I've gathered, there's a real full program here today. There'll be an in-conversation session with Dean of Gray's Dan Allen. We'll also hear opening remarks from Judith Winter, and I've heard there'll be speeches from Joyce Cairns and the current head of painting, Michael Agnew. Then later this afternoon, there'll be an alumni gathering, a lovely opportunity for past and current students to share experiences, reconnect, and talk about how the school shaped them. And of course, the exhibition itself, it's going to remain open throughout the day.
And what's the mood like?
Yeah, so if you can hear me, I think what you said is about the mood down here.
Yep.
Right. So the mood here is warm, buzzing, a little emotional, I'll say, and even full of nostalgia. People are taking their time with the artworks. They're pointing out familiar faces and remembering old studios. There's also a beautiful mix of generations here. Our team earlier spoke to a gentleman who's quite old, I would say a septuagenarian, and he said he studied at the university. He's here, revisiting memories from decades ago, and it really shows how deep Gray's root runs in Aberdeen. There's a real pride in the hair here, if you ask me.
And can anyone pop down to the gallery and see the exhibition?
Absolutely. So it's completely free to the public. The exhibition is open from today right through until April 2026. So, people have plenty of time to come down, take their time and enjoy it. Whether you're an art lover or you're just curious, the gallery doors are open until April.
And with this being just one of the events planned to celebrate Gray's 140, what else can people in Aberdeen hope to see over the next few months?
Right. There's a whole year of activity ahead. People can look forward to more talks. I've heard there'll be hands-on creative workshops, student-led tours, special events and guided walks, connected to the school's history. So Grace is really using this anniversary to open its doors to the wider community and share the richness of its past and present with the people of Aberdeen.
Thanks,
That's
Aisha.
it from us at the gallery. Back to you at the studio.
Thank you, Aisha. We'll come back to speak to you later. So we'll be putting the exhibition together has been an epic task, and the team who were given this huge responsibility were Judith Winter and Sally Reaper. Second-year journalism student Callum Lewis caught up with Sally here in the gallery earlier this week when the exhibition was being hung. Surrounded by the installation crew, step ladders and spirit levels, she was in high spirits.
It's going good. It's going better than we expected, to be honest, because we've never worked in this space before. It's always challenging when you come into a space that you don't know. So there's always this anticipation, there's always this nervous excitement. There's also just this aspiration, I think, in some ways, because you want to aspire to do something that you want the public to really like, but you're never really sure because it's obviously all to do with taste. So yeah, we're very excited. There's lots of work to see, which is good. It's good for the public. And it's just a great way to show off what Grays is all about and its history.
For people who won't be able to get here, but would have liked to have been here, can you describe what you're trying to represent in the exhibition?
Okay, so as you can imagine, we're marking this 140 years of Gray's School of Art. So that's all about art school education. That's about the disciplines that are taught within an art school environment. So all the work that's on display have been created in art school. So what is an art school? It's a place where you go to draw, to look, to make work, so painting, sculpture, you're doing design, so you'll do textiles. There's lots and lots of different types of work, but predominantly in our show it's historical work. So a lot of it is painting, a lot of it is painting on canvas, a lot of it is drawing, a lot of it is sculptural work, so maybe ceramics, things that are made out of found objects, and then you've got your more newer work which is made out of like collage and card. So there's a variation of different types of work that you can see on display, and lots of things from the archive, so lots of things from the Art and Heritage Collection, so like photographs, like print blocks, things that we've had since like 1880. So it's been around for a long time.
This show is intriguingly called Never Make a Head Bigger Than a Melon. Can you decode that for us?
Yeah, of course. So what does that mean? It's meant to be a little bit curious. It's meant to make you smile a little bit. It's meant to make you want to come and think, well, what is never make a head bigger than a melon? But actually it's about what you're taught in the life room. So when you're in the life room and you're drawing from life, so that's drawing from a female model or a male model, and you've got to do observational drawing, so you've got to kind of look at perspective and stuff. When you're drawing a head, the advice that you're given is never make it bigger than a melon. Never make your head bigger than a melon. So it's to do with proportion, it's to do with scale, and it's to do with proportion. But it's also to do with like humility, and also it's a bit like to say, well, don't ever get above your station, like as well. So it's a little bit of like humour in there as well. So it's not just all about like perspective and drawing. It is about saying, just stay in your box a little bit. Which is good.
What are the highlights of the exhibition, or what should people specifically look out for?
Wow, that's a big question. That's a big question. What should they look out for? I just think people should just be surprised, actually. I think, we're surprised. So when you look back at historical work, what we've learned through the process of doing this project is just what's handed down from generation to generation. So teachers that have gone before, our current teachers, the teachers before them, the teachers before them, they've all passed down this visual language, which is just something that is very Grays. So I think we've found a kind of commonality, or we've found a thread of practice within all of the works, and I think it shows the kind of DNA of what Grays is. And when I talk about that, I mean about talking about the use of colour, like tonal colours, like colour variation, the palettes. If you look around the show, you'll see lots of red. There's all these little wee nods of reds, just pop up around the works. So if you come in, maybe look for that, because that's quite interesting. If you see all these little pops of red throughout the work, and that's just about people helping your eye dance across the planes of the works.
We know you've got some specifically commissioned work here, particularly from 4 women's artists. What was the idea of that?
Well, when you look at the history and you look at the people that went to art school, it was predominantly male. So all of the teaching staff was predominantly male, and there was only 4 pioneering female artist educators that came in. Frances Walker was one of the first. She was one of the first females to teach at Grays School of Art. So we just felt it was really important, because as female educators, the way that they taught was really nurturing. And in a very male-dominated environment, it was really important for us to kind of highlight that. It was good that we put out that commission and we got a younger generation of female artists to respond, as I say, to these pioneering educators. They really did transform how teaching was delivered at Grays, and they brought in a kind of maybe a sensibility, a kindness, like a different way of working, which I think worked brilliantly, and they helped shape and define what Grays was in its next generation, which was in the new building. They kind of defined that.
What do you hope the people of Aberdeen will get from the show? I know we might have alluded to that already.
I hope they feel proud. They have an incredible art school, and I think sometimes when an art school sits on the periphery of a town from the city centre, it might feel a little bit dislocated. And I think for me, what I really hope is that it reconnects the public of Aberdeen with its art school. We're standing here in the art gallery. It belongs to the people of Aberdeen. This is our collection. It's the same with Grays. All of these collections that have been collected in archives, they belong to us as people, and I just think that's what I want people to feel. I want them to feel proud that artists, like the calibre of these artists, have came out of a place that they call home, and that is what Grays is to many, many people.
Just finally, although all eyes are on the art gallery, the Grays 140 season, it doesn't stop here. What else can people look forward to?
Oh no, it certainly doesn't stop in the art gallery. It's a very active exhibition, which I'm really excited about. Sometimes when you come to shows, they're just quite passive, and then you kind of come in and go out. So there's a whole programme of activity. We've got an off-site programme where we're doing satellite projects in different venues across the city. So we've got things going on in the music hall. We've got things going on in cooperator space. We're going to be having our students lead exhibition tours. We're having an amazing radio station on the first day that we open up. We've got talks programme happening. We've got guest at Grays. We've got workshops, talks and events. So there's a whole programme. We've got lots of things for every single age, from cradle to graveyard. That's what we've got. We've got something that everybody will enjoy. And I think that's what's important for us is to perform this archive, and that's what that programme's all about. So please always check out our different websites, because there will be lots more information comes up there.
The Grays anniversary comes at a moment of great change for the school. Journalism, film and media and fashion management courses have recently become part of Grays, and in the last few weeks it has been announced that the Scott Sutherland School of Architecture will also join Grays. These moves are part of a wider reorganisation at Robert Gordon University, driven by financial pressures. And the man tasked with leading Grays through these interesting times is the new dean, Professor Dan Allen, who came to the North East from the South West, Bath University. Millie Cumming caught up with Dan a few days ago and started by asking him about his own art.
I'm a ceramicist. I graduated from a degree in ceramics in 1995 in Cardiff in Wales, and set up a business in Cardiff where I worked alongside lots of other ceramicists, and we shared the facilities there. I've made ceramics ever since. My work is predominantly self-portraiture, although in the last 10 years it's not been figurative. I've been working with objects, and it's been much more time-based and performative than in recent years. So my own practice, if I were to frame it now, is somewhere between sculpture and performance and film.
So what kind of drew you to come up to create Grays in the first place?
Grays School of Art has a really strong reputation nationally and to a certain extent internationally. So when the opportunity came up, I had to take it seriously. One thing that drew me to Grays is that Grays has an extraordinary track record of engaging with society more widely. So in many art schools, our students are educated within the confines of the art school. At Grays, the walls are much more permeable, and the engagement with communities and society more widely is exceptional at Grays, to the extent that Grays is celebrated, particularly in the city, but in the wider northeast region of Scotland. So I wanted to be a part of that.
How would you sort of describe Grays to people that you meet?
Grays is unique. It's collegiate and supported community of creative makers and thinkers who see value in seeing the world from different perspectives and celebrating difference as a place that is truly diverse and inclusive. A community is a community that feels like it has a responsibility to bring about positive change in the wider world, and everything that we do is in pursuit of making that change.
Obviously, there's been quite a bit of reorganisation and some job losses throughout time. Where are we at today?
So it's interesting, isn't it? Grays is 140 years old next week, and Grays was first established as a school of science and art, and over the last 140 years it has expanded its academic portfolio and reduced it. It's become part of a faculty. It's gone back to school. A few years ago, the school became bigger with the integration of film, media, journalism and fashion management, fashion business. So Grays is always changing and has changed throughout 140 years. And if it didn't change, then it would stop being as relevant in the wider world as it is. So we have a responsibility to continually evolve. Actually, at this moment in time, Grays is at an interesting juncture in that the university has also decided to pursue a closer integration of Grays School of Art with Scott Sutherland School of Architecture and Built Environment. So those schools will be strategically aligned going forward. And what that means is it means that our voice is even stronger and our potential positive impact on the wider society and communities can be even more substantial. So I'm really excited about the role that I think Grays and Scott Sutherland will be able to play in actually forging a greater future for the region and a greater sense of identity for the city, and actually correct some of the parts of society that need our focus.
Obviously, 140 years is quite a long time. Do you think you could tell us a little bit about your vision for the school in the next few years?
My vision is really the vision that's been there for some time at Grays. You know, I was drawn to Grays because I see what an impact the school has on the city and on the region. I feel like Grays' future must follow that premise, but we can do it in an even more ambitious way. I think we have the opportunity to make even greater impact, to bring about more positive change, to be even more committed in our pursuit of enabling the world and those within it to value different perspectives and actually to celebrate difference.
It's not every day that something turns 140. So what are you kind of hoping people can get from, you know, the G140 season?
I mean, there's loads. The difficulty we have is that Grays has had such an impact. Not only the creative community of Scotland, but Grays has made a real impact internationally. And it's not possible to pot that into sort of a series of events that truly reflect the impact that Grays has had over the 140 years. But what we can do is we can just pause and reflect on some of the great things that have happened and celebrate some of the brilliant talent that's come out of our school over the decades. And so the exhibition at Aberdeen Art Gallery is a celebration of actually how our graduating students have gone on and established supremely successful careers for themselves. And in doing so, have also pushed Grays' global reputation into the conscience of the many. But we must also, through the next sort of 6 to 9 months, continue the brilliant work that we do in terms of engaging students, kids, children in schools and communities more widely in exposing them to the power of creativity, to get them to see the world from different perspectives, perhaps to surprise themselves in the process, enable them to see real value and purpose for themselves personally, but for the world more widely in producing whatever they produce, whether that's a film, a photograph, a piece of artwork, beautifully designed object, or so on.
What do you see the future of art schools looking like as we go forward?
There's no doubt that art schools have encountered significant challenges for many years. There has been, across the UK, to a lesser extent in Scotland than the rest of the UK, there has been a de-incentivisation of creativity in primary and particularly secondary education. And that brings about significant challenges for us because many potential students have perhaps not been exposed to creativity in a way that we would normally historically expect them. So art schools have encountered significant decline in applications for quite some considerable time. And that's partly as a consequence of, mostly as a consequence of what's happened in secondary education. What that means is that we have to, in order to do our job, we have to engage those schools and those communities in new ways to plug the gap in what has been a shift in the education of our youngsters. That will in some way enable those that perhaps have been disadvantaged or not been given the opportunity in their school to see the potential and also to see often how their futures can be shaped by working and studying and learning and then professionally working in the creative industries.
Joyce W. Cairns is one of Gray's best known and best loved artists. Joyce was in the first class which was taught at the current Gray's building at Garthdee. First a student, later a teacher, she's been a constant cheerleader for the school for nearly 60 years. Her work, The Dying Green, is part of the exhibition and has also inspired new work by Gray's postgraduate student Marie Chantal Hamrock, which is also in the show. At the press preview yesterday, Caitlin MacLeod met Joyce in front of her painting.
So from what you've seen so far, have you had a wee chance to have a wee look about?
I haven't really inspected the first bit. I came round to see where my painting was, so that was number one importance.
Oh, of course. So, but you do have art in the exhibit. It's obviously quite difficult to describe it with words for the radio. But can you say a little bit about your work that's here?
Well, it's based in Fitty, where I lived for all the time for about 36 years. So I still have a place in Fitty, so I keep coming and going. And it's really celebrating my marriage to my third husband, who was a very handsome pilot. And it was really, in Fitty, Monday was washing day, and women congregated around the washing lines in Fitty, and all the people in this would be kind of recognisable characters in the village. Dear, I can't really say more because of it's also because it was on the edge of the red light district. But you know, there's one there who was known as Interpol. You can't do anything in the village without Interpol knowing, and what she doesn't know, she makes up. I'd also, I think, when I did this painting, I'd recently been on a German naval boat in the harbour, which was from the Federal Republic of Germany, and that was a leaflet. So the German's got his hand caught in a press. It's kind of punishment, I suppose, holding this leaflet. And basically, the Fly Navy T-shirt was my new husband's because he was a Fleet Air Arm pilot. And people kind of, in the old days, probably washed in the sheds, you know, so these are the kind of net drying sheds. Fitty had a lot of brilliant old sheds, but a lot of them have now fallen into decay and are no more. What else do we have? We have a naval boat coming out the harbour, so that's the South Pier, the South Breakwater Lighthouse, not the North. You know, there's one in the village which is the North Breakwater, and we've got the pilot house, the old pilot house up here. So basically, it's everything to do with Fitty and when I lived there, and as I saw it, a kind of turbulent burlesque of things going on, you know, from the sexy petticoat to the favourite knickers in the washing thing and the fish. Of course, it's no longer a fishing community. There's very few of the old city folk left now, which is a shame. There are some real characters. I moved into the village in 1979, and probably one of the original incomers, as they would say in the village, Free the Toon. That was me, Free the Toon. And, and all the curtains were twitching, wondering what was going to go on in that house. There were all sorts of rumours it was going to be a commune, they'll all be in amongst one another, and all that sort of stuff that went on in the village at that time. That was in the bottom here under the old washing presses. Tigger the cat, who's one of my cats. So basically, it's just centred around typical village life, but with incidents that come on. And I suppose that's myself at the top, lurking with a drink, in party mood.
So now I suppose you're inspiring new artists as well. We've got Marie Chantal coming tomorrow, who's, I think, taken a lot of inspiration from you.
Yeah.
So how does that feel as an artist yourself?
Well, I suppose I'm used to that, really, but I'm glad she's, I didn't really know about the competition, but I'm glad that she's chosen, when we looked at who was going to do me, it was quite good that it's somebody who works in a totally different genre. I wouldn't have really liked it to be another painter. So, seeing what she put in, it was very elegant and kind of mystical. So, yeah.
So as well, it's obviously, this isn't just a celebration of Grays, it's also the 60th anniversary of the move from Schoolhill to Garthdee for Grays in 1966. So the contrast between sort of the Victorian architecture of Schoolhill and then you go to Garthdee, which is very sort of steel and glass. Was there a real sense of kind of a shock of the new when you got there?
I was in the first cohort into the new building at Garthdee, so I didn't know the old building. I think that some of the students who had been in the old building missed the kind of coziness and the history of that building. And I know that when I went, it was brand new. There hadn't been anybody painting in there. The floors were pristine. It was a building that had so much glass. I had nothing to compare it with. And all I know is that, one of the models, who was a very large chap, used to be sent round with a rag to wipe the paint off the floors, And Henderson Blythe, who was the head of painting, I thought he was the head Janny for the first 2 years because he used to come in and check the clocks. So, yeah, and of course it was a very different course then, a very academic course. It hadn't changed since 1823, or when not really. But, I don't regret having been through a course like that. I think I could have done without the antique painting and antique drawing, but apart from that, you were just thrilled to be there. I have no complaints. Nowadays people's expectations and boredom levels are very short. I didn't mind going and drawing every week, the model. You didn't get any kind of exciting backgrounds. I used to do that when I became a lecturer. Well, you had to because you had so many students. You needed lots of things that if they had a bum view of the model, shall we say, they had something more interesting to look at, yeah? So, yeah, it was a very different time. And at that time, there was 9 members in the painting staff, whereas now I don't know what there is. So there 3? I'm not really sure. And of course, it was run like school. You had bells, you went in, you did maybe, you were split into design and fine art. So it was kind of half your week was in design and half week, and that was for 2 years. It was a 2-year general course, and only at the end of that did you decide what you wanted to specialise in.
So was it still a very male-dominated space?
Well, funnily enough, Grays had Frances Walker. Now, somewhere like Dundee had no female members of staff. Edinburgh had Elizabeth Blackadder. Glasgow at that point probably had none. And I know that, according to Frances, when she went to Dundee to do a visit or something, that Alberto Morocco said, when they got applicants from women who wanted to teach there, he just ripped them up and put them in the bucket. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what Frances said. And she might have been a bit extreme with it, who knows. So we were lucky. And then in my 3rd year, we were joined by Sylvia Wishart. And the first meeting I had with Sylvia, she took us for 3rd year drawing. So we thought, this is lovely, a new person coming in, lovely Orkney-Acadian accent. And so we're all doing our best. And I can remember doing a drawing that was so complicated, everything, and the bloody zinc in it. And she came and puffed away behind me. People smoked then. So she took a putty rubber and she kind of quietened down a lot of stuff. And it was brilliant. It was an actual revelation to me about less is more, or you can have it, but it's how you play off. It's like music, soft and hard and fast and whatnot. So, no, so Sylvia, and I can remember again, I think I must have never still life at some point, and I took every feathered bird out the still life cupboards, grouse, partridges, you name it. And she just looked at it and she said, well, I wouldn't like to paint all the feathers myself,
Must be hard work.
Oh, yeah, well, I can't remember. It was probably an utter disaster.
Well, I won't take up too much of your time. I'll let you go and have a wee look about. But thank you so much. It's lovely to meet you as well.
You're listening to G140 Radio, live from RGU at Garthdee and Aberdeen Art Gallery. Thanks to Ben for looking after the first half an hour. I'm Xander Steele, and still to come today more voices from the gallery in the opening speeches. But first, let's find out more about the school's founder, John Gray. Born near Turriff, he came to Aberdeen to seek his fortune. He trained as a carpenter and eventually became a partner in an engineering company. Described as a humble and unassuming man who spoke his native Doric in his private life, nonetheless, he had an ambitious idea in mind, a proposal he put in writing to the council in 1883.
Aberdeen, 11th October 1883. My dear Lord Provost, as I have already expressed to you on more than one occasion, I have long been of the opinion that the accommodation at present provided in the Mechanics Institute for the School of Science and Art is very unsuitable for the purpose, and that a new school should be built in connection with and in proximity to the Art Gallery, now in course of erection beside Gordon's College. With regard to the Mechanics Institute itself, I believe that if it were relieved of the School of Science and Art, the building could be converted into a public library at small expense, and I am aware that the directors of the institution are willing to hand over the building to the Town Council, along with the valuable library attached to the institution. Should my fellow citizens see fit to adopt the Public Libraries Act, which would be a great boon to the working classes. Being desirous of assisting in carrying out these views, I beg to submit the following proposals, which I have to request you will be good enough to lay before the governors of Robert Gordon's College. These are: 1. That the governors of Robert Gordon's College shall set apart and dedicate as a site for the School of Science and Art the ground on the east side of the college entrance from Schoolhill, on which the old grammar school at present stands. 2. That they shall erect at my own cost on the said site a School of Science and Art for behoof of the community of Aberdeen, in harmony with the design of the Art Gallery and according to the accompanying plans prepared by Messrs. Matthew and Mackenzie Architects. On this plan, it will be observed that an arched gateway is shown, connecting the Art Gallery and the proposed school. This is part of the scheme I should like to see carried out, but it appears to me it more properly falls to be taken by the governors of Robert Gordon's College, either by themselves or in conjunction with the Art Gallery Committee. That the school shall be named Gray's School of Science and Art, and as regards the selection and appointment of teachers, the arrangement of classes, the curriculum of instruction, and other details shall be under the management and administration of the governors of Robert Gordon's College. That the governors of the college shall be responsible for the maintenance of the school in all time to come, it being, however, my desire that the cost of maintenance shall, as far as is practical, be defrayed out of the revenue of the school, and that the fees shall be so regulated from time to time as to make the school self-supporting. I trust that the governors of Robert Gordon's College will entertain these proposals favourably, and in the event of their doing so, I shall cause detailed plans and specifications of the building to be prepared and submitted for their approval. I am, my dear Lord Provost, yours very truly, John Gray.
Well, obviously the City Council was delighted to accept Gray's offer, and just 2 years later the School of Art was complete and the first students enrolled. It was a piece of classic Victorian architecture built in local Kemnay and Corrarini granite. But Gray's was being built at a time of immense change. Ben Lawrenson has been investigating on how the world looked in 1885.
The late 1880s was a period of impressive civic development in Aberdeen. Union Street had been established for more than 50 years, but now the focus moved to Schoolhill. Robert Gordon's had just emerged as a day school, and many new granite buildings, including the art school and the neighbouring art gallery, confirmed Aberdeen as the home of some of the world's most distinctive granite architecture. Further afield, different styles were emerging. The first skyscraper was completed in Chicago. The Washington Monument and Statue of Liberty were proudly taking their place on US soil at the same time as Gray's opening its doors. It's fair to say that the Gray School of Art arrived at a game-changing period of invention and cultural significance, not just in Aberdeen, but all over the world. World-famous fashion designer Hugo Boss was born in 1885, someone who would go on to have an enormous impact in the fashion world throughout the 20th century, and even now his brand and legacy continue to live on. The UK's political stance in 1885 was highly volatile, marked by the crisis that followed the loss of Khartoum. This forced Liberal William Gladstone to resign, allowing Conservative Lord Salisbury to briefly take power. Aberdeen was represented by two constituencies for the first time, Aberdeen North and Aberdeen South, both held by the Liberals. It was a time of invention too. The introduction of the motorbike, and just a year later, the car, meant that pretty soon the great and the good of Aberdeen would be able to travel to their newly opened art school without having to use a horse and cart or a bicycle.
That was Ben Lawrenson reporting there. In a few minutes, the invited guests will be making the short walk from Cowdray Hall to the Art Gallery and their first chance to see the exhibition. Putting together a show of this magnitude is quite a challenge, even for an experienced curator. Dr. Judith Winter had the task of sifting through the thousands of potential pieces for the exhibition, and she admitted it was an enormous responsibility.
A group show of this scale, for 140 years of an art school, means that we've had to really think about its layout and the way that we navigate people around the space. And that interests me a lot because it's a very different way to working than, say, I used to be a curator at Middlesbrough Institute of Modern Art and at Dundee Contemporary Arts, and I've done quite a lot of freelance exhibitions, and they're normally very much working with artists, right, living artists. Whereas actually when you work with collections, it's a kind of quite a different skill, because what you've got to do is empathise with the works and work out what that narrative is going to be, whether it is a narrative that you're telling, and how you locate works within each space. So, the interesting thing about Aberdeen Art Gallery, that large, quite impressive exhibition space that's on the top floor, it's quite thin and it's quite narrow, and there's the architectural site that you've got to kind of work with. So the first idea that we had was to sort of set the scene in the opening galleries. So we're telling a kind of narrative based on those two photographs, a photograph of a sign coming down from Schoolhill, going up in Garthdee, the idea of how do you talk about art school identity. And so in that first room, we're going to have a very significant painting by Andrew Cranston called Gray School of Art, May 1968. And it's a work that really questions and makes you think about what art schools are for and the studio culture. And it's also got some historical elements in there, a beautiful film work by Callum Kelly that is going to introduce the art school environment. And then when you go into the space, the first thing we want to do is really show the audience something of the history of how artist educators taught people how to look. So the key idea of moving through the space is that you meet these people that don't normally get necessarily spoken about in terms of how artists teach. So we're going to focus on learning how to look. We're also focusing on Grays has a very specific identity related to storytelling, memory, and the imagination. And then we've got another area that we were really keen to focus on, which is really about a very pioneering foundation course in the 60s that really taught people how to listen to materials, work with them, processes, think about the landscape and the environment, which of course then means you've got a lot of things that are relevant to an emergent generation who are actually thinking, how do I look? How do I imagine what could be possible? And how do I shape the future? The final area of the gallery, it's like a loop. So the idea was that in the final space we have this little area called Performing the Archives, where we could see the exhibition as a gathering space to gather people's stories and narratives. And there's a series of archive boxes that will hold and continue to generate information, and we're going to have artists that perform the archive literally, so more emergent artists that we're inviting in to actually work with some of those histories and bring them to life.
So we've been speaking about this when we've been planning it, and we've heard that ceramics aren't so much of a big thing within the exhibition, but they are within Grays. Why is that?
Yeah, so it's very difficult, isn't it? Because you've got a really limited space, and how do you work with that? So there is some ceramics in there, and there are some triggers to ceramics, but I realised that, there's so many things. Like, I would like to have had lots of fashion in there. You could have had textiles, you could have had, but actually what we had to do was find a way to navigate that space and really focus on more what all artists are, whatever discipline they do are taught. We have got a wonderful ceramics installation, a small one, but it's by Amy Benzie, who runs the Scottish Sculpture. She's a sort of technician within the Scottish Sculpture Workshop, but a very interesting ceramicist in her own right, and part of the D-side studio. So of course what we plan to do is some off-site projects, so that we'll take people to, introduce people. So it's almost like I want you to see the exhibition space, or the audience to see the exhibition space, as a way to signpost them to also different things and other places. The beautiful work that Amy Benzie is doing with ceramics is a correspondence with Francis Walker, with a painting by Francis Walker. And Francis Walker actually helped select Amy, who is a younger artist, to do this work. And it's really very interested in, her painting is called Surface Tracks, and there's all these sorts of traces of the environment and this relationship between man and the environment. And I think Amy was very, very interested in her process or way of working and mark making. So there's some new ceramics by Amy Benzie in the exhibition. But of course, Grays has a remarkable history, doesn't it, with a relationship to ceramics. So we've got some references to that. So in one of the vitrines, very tiny as it is, there's a brochure that tells people about the studio pottery and when it first came into being, which was actually 1961.
So next, you also, when we were talking previously before, you mentioned about the external artists, or the international ones, and you mentioned your story about the piece coming from New York. Would you be able to tell us about that?
Yeah, so remember that I said that there's that kind of key work in the opening space called Grays School of Art, May 1968. It's actually by a painter called Andrew Cranston, who studied at Grays, but he also taught there for 25 years. And then he left Grays, perhaps a little bit like many artists. There was a bit of an exodus from a lot of artists who wanted to just really focus on their own careers, and they felt that art schools were changing their direction. So he did this project, basically, where he did a whole series of paintings, and one might say they're sort of a homage to the art school that he remembered, taught at, loved. And of course then when he had studied at Grays, he went on to the Royal College of Art, And at that time, he was a peer of Peter Doig, who is a very significant international painter. And what I understand is that they had a really great friendship, but also one that's born out of this real interest in what painting is, how it teaches us how to look, how it teaches us how to be attentive to the world. And they sort of had a really sort of strong relationship, and I think that they swapped work potentially. So we thought it was really nice to bring a kind of, art schools are about peer-to-peer. And so it was really lovely to bring that work and have it back in Aberdeen. But it's actually has been in a studio in the States. And so Peter Doig has enabled us to actually, that conversation that those two artists had mean that work is very significant in the show. And of course, the title is a little bit of, it's May 1968, so he's actually really interested in the studio scene of being quite traditional in an era when actually we think about art schools being about protest and activism and student riots and things. So it's kind of tongue-in-cheek, it's kind of funny, and we want people to go around the exhibition and feel the joy of being at an art school, not just feel it's very staid. So that's a very important narrative.
And so also, what would it mean to Grays and to you if the exhibition was to be very successful?
You know what? I already feel it's doing the thing I've wanted it to do, which is to connect people who maybe haven't had conversations for a lot of years, to really have pride in Gray's School of Art. I mean, 140 years is quite something, right? And its role over those years. So it would mean such a lot to me if that art school, if we really understand the value of art schools. So it's kind of more the question would be, what would success be? Success isn't like plaudits or people saying it's the most amazing exhibition. We don't know yet, because it's like we're in install stage, and and it is not the kind of exhibition that it's a unique exhibition to me. I don't know whether it'll work or not at this moment, so I'm a little bit nervous about that. But the success of it is not that. The success is actually introducing to the next generation those questions of why does art schools matter? And why is Grays really holding on in a way to some of those traditions that a lot of other art schools have actually left. But actually it's so the success would be in the sense of actually we could all come together, different people could come together from across the different art schools, not in a competitive way, but to say art schools matter. That would be success.
You're listening to the G140 Radio. I'm Xander Steele. A strong tradition at Grays going back over several decades is the series of talks and lectures from prominent figures in the art world. In 2012, the artist Sophie Omerod returned to Grays to discuss her work and had developed since her graduation, and how Grays had shaped her artistic practice.
Okay, well, first of all, it doesn't feel like I've been away from Grays for that long, so it feels very strange to be here telling you all about my work. The first thing, I'm going to run through with you what I've done since I graduated, and I hope that it shows you that you can carry on being an artist after you leave art school. I personally thought that the world was going to sort of come to an end when I had my degree show, and I thought that it would be the last opportunity for me to exhibit my work, and also the kind of ultimate point that my work was going to reach. But that's not the case at all. Actually, it was just sort of the beginning of me realising what my work's about. So the piece up on the screen here was in my degree show. It kind of describes what my interests were when I was in fourth year. I work very instinctively. I usually begin a painting and don't really plan it or think about what it's about. I sort of discover that through the making of it. So I suppose that when I was in fourth year, I realised my work was about rhythm and creating movement on the canvas through repetition of forms, through gestural brush marks and my use of colour. Horses were quite an important motif in my work when I was in 4th year. I think that I liked them because they had some sort of root in the history of art for me. It might sound quite simple to say that, but for instance, this picture could be a battle scene, or it could be a cave drawing, or a Renaissance pattern. So again, it was about movement, and I was quite interested in the photographs of Edward Muybridge, and I used those to kind of position horses in different poses, and that created a movement for me. This image is both still and moving at the same time. I would also paint quite thickly and get really involved with the materials to a point where I would often overwork a painting. It's almost like the paint takes control of me, and things can get out of hand when you're using the materials. Things get muddy and paintings can get to a point where they can't go anywhere anymore, and that's sometimes not a good place to be. So I look at artists quite a lot. I don't, as I've said, I don't have a direct subject that my work's about, but I use what artists have said and work that I like. I kind of borrow their ideas, start me off when I'm making a piece of work, and if I'm stuck, I go to them for advice or for help. So Cecily Brown was quite an inspiration to me. She was the artist I picked when I was doing my 2nd year project, where you copy what an artist's work's like. I just love the way that the colours are so fresh in her paintings, and they're actually very complicated. There'll be several spaces that are described in one painting, and you could look at it forever and always find something new in the painting. Leon Kossoff as well is also one of my favourites. He's an artist who struggles with the use of paint as a material, and that's something I feel I can empathise with. I heard him speaking in an interview once, and he said that he's never been a draftsman. He feels he has no skill at drawing, but I don't think that matters in his work. The figures are slightly out of proportion, and maybe that the space isn't architecturally sound, but he gets across the atmosphere that he felt when he was in this place. And yeah, there's a movement there as well. You can almost feel people rushing round the corner, feel the heat of the underground. So I often look at his work and kind of borrow colours or directly borrow a composition. This is a study from when I was in 4th year that's very similar to that kind of idea, a tension between figures and materials. It half describes something to you, but does that matter, or does it just matter that it's paint? So after I graduated, I was lucky enough to be awarded the John Kinross Scholarship. I worked for a while and then I travelled to Florence. As you can see, it was complete breathing space for me. I'd spent a year working in my studio at Gray's and not really taken much time out. So I was starting to sort of resent going into the studio. I didn't enjoy it as much anymore, and I felt really starved for information or life experience, because I'm still so young. I hadn't really experienced much. So Florence for me was an amazing time. I lived up near the top of this picture in the greener area with a boy who was in my year in painting. So we were living in quite a suburban part of Florence, which was really nice actually. I would walk every day into the city centre and go and see museums, go out drawing, just whatever I felt like. I totally disconnected myself from home, so didn't answer any emails, only spoke to my family when I had to. So yeah, Florence is a really strange city. Some people don't like it and some people do, but it had a real mystery and kind of darkness to it for me. I think it's something about the architecture that these grand buildings are timeless and your presence there doesn't really matter to them. And yeah, the streets just kind of swallow you up.
It's just before 12 noon and I'm Mackenzie Heaton. Visitors to the exhibition will find work made by more than 50 artists with connections to Grays. Of course, there is a wide variety of work made in the past, but there are a number of new commissions in the show, and one of them is an ambitious film installation made by one of our journalism lecturers, Callum Kelly. Arranged over 3 video screens, he describes it as a love letter to Grays. It charts the life and times of Grays through the decades, capturing the rhythms, gestures and quiet rituals that define the school.
So my commission for G140 is kind of mixing a photographic archive from the RGU Heritage and Collections with my own archive that I gathered when I first worked at Grays from 2010 to 2021. And during that time I filmed and photographed all manners of just what the school was like in everyday life and anything interesting that happened. And a lot of those activities and exercises and processes you kind of have to repeat them to kind of develop that skill, but that kind of repetition is also repeating activities that have happened within the school, not just undertaken by individual artists or students. So if you go back 10, 20, 30, 50 years, you find the same sorts of activities, the same sorts of processes kind of echoing through the building. So I was kind of making a kind of like a love letter to the school, kind of drawing connections between my more contemporary video archive with the more historic photographic archive to just give a sense of what Grays is like, what a normal service if you were to come in as someone who's never been in an art school environment, never been in Grays before, what it looks like, what it kind of feels like, the kind of things that you'd find happening around the place, and just try and create something that was like a living portrait to the school.
So for the 140th anniversary, how important do you think it is to be celebrating an art school like it's got so much historic prevalence for the city?
I think something that one of Grays' strengths is its location, and it's kind of like parkland, and it's surrounded by nature and its proximity to the river, and that is very different to all the other art schools in Scotland and most other art schools in the UK, because they're in city centres or in urban environments. And as much as that is a strength and a kind of unique characteristic of Grays, it also means it's a little bit out of the way from people's minds sometimes. And sometimes the school and the North East can be quite bad about shouting about what we're doing and what the school is doing. And what the school does is generally punching well above its weight. So I think it's incredibly important to kind of acknowledge that and to celebrate that and to give a space for the school to shout and to return to next door to the building where it all started back in Schoolhill and look back in those 140 years and kind of acknowledge the kind of the strength of work and the impact of the people who trained and taught in both buildings have had culturally and kind of the wider culture.
And how does it feel for you to have like your work featured in the anniversary like installation?
It's actually quite emotional, kind of seeing my work in proximity to people who were either kind of heroes of art culture and the arts that were before your time, or hung alongside the work of people who trained you and who were taught by those kind of the people that you always kind of just saw in galleries and you didn't happen to know them but just because of chance of time. And to have your work and those links kind of drawn between that and to be put in that mix is quite humbling, but also kind of realizing that your work is kind of seen in that kind of that level as those other artists that you've obviously looked up to over my career and my training. It's quite lovely. Training as an artist and going to art school isn't uni. Art school's art school. It's its own thing. And art school gives you a frame and provides you kind of training for how to view the world. And once you've kind of opened that Pandora's box and you kind of learn to look, you can't close that. Once you're trained and you have that eye and that kind of approach as an artist, whether you're a practicing artist or you take those skills and you do something else, you'll always still have that sensibility, that way of seeing. And it does change you as an individual going through that process. And lots of artists and lots of students, when they graduate, kind of they ebb and flow with how prolific they may be at any given time, but they still make those connections. They still see the kind of, sounds daft to say, they still see tonally, they still see line, they still see space and tension in a way that they wouldn't have seen before, and they have a language to describe it that most people don't have.
We have more guests at Gray's recordings from the archive, courtesy of Lauren Galt. She detailed her creative process and some of her first shows that formed her as an artist.
I'm going to start chronologically, which I think is the easiest thing to do. So I'm going to start with what felt like quite an important exhibition recently, and that was back in 2013. It was the first big exhibition I'd done within an institution, and it sort of, I felt, heralded the start of how I began making more sense of my approach and how I found a best approach to making exhibitions. And I think it was a step in sort of me asserting in my own head what my practice was and how I was going to go about it. So this was an exhibition in Tramway in Glasgow, and it was the small space at the front, so it was the biggest space I'd worked in, and of course it was within an institution and working with a curator and all the rest of it. And so, as John said, I do work within sculptural installation, but I've also been trying to branch out into making film and also text, specifically text as a way to be an addition to a standard exhibition text. I've been thinking about making small abstract text as a way to sort of wayfind within the exhibition, and a way that's maybe less prescriptive or illustrative than maybe standard exhibition texts. So the rationale behind making these sort of text gestures as a way to maybe provide a frame or a way to think about the work in a way that was quite expansive, and maybe touched on some of the references in the show without being overly descriptive and therefore limiting. So this was the first time I had done that, and it was really simple. This was it. It was just outside the show, and the show itself was called Sweet Ensilage, and that was the name taken from one of the first books about silage making, and that's the way you cut and store grass, so it is a winter feedstuff. And I used that as a title because it was sort of a motif that ran throughout the exhibition, this idea of a material becoming more of itself, or a process that's applied to a material that can make it not transform itself but become almost a more articulate version of itself. So in this case, when you make silage, for example, grass turns into this other sort of otherworldly substance that's much more valuable. It lasts for a lot longer, but it is essentially grass. So this was the precept for successful silage making, and the little bit at the bottom talks about this tool that was used to check silos. So you'd use this tool to prod a silo to make sure that what was said to be there was there. And for me, it was a really nice way to talk about a way to know something without experiencing it. So you can use this apparatus or this tool to know what's there without actually having to uncover what's there. And that's an idea that I think you'll see crop up quite a lot. So anyway, I'll move on. So within this exhibition, I referenced this lady called Temple Grandin, who she's an authority on both livestock and the treatment of autism. She discovered this is called a squeeze machine, and she made this for people who suffer with autism after observing cattle in a veterinary squeeze chute becoming a lot calmer when they emerged from it. And the rationale is that people with autism, they can't quite cope with sort of acute sensory experiences like a hug, for example. So when they have an even pressure applied all over, they become very calm, and they're said to be able to think nicer thoughts, be more social. So again, it's this idea of applying a force or a treatment to something and making it more of itself. So in this case, it's actually a person, and it's this sort of process being applied to them to make them a more sort of articulate or, I suppose, temporarily advanced version of themselves. So this is another reference which I'll talk about, and within each show you'll see a jump between a lot of different references which are all kind of tied together, and by the end of it they should all be making sense and why I've put them together. And this guy he's called a berserker, and he was found in a hoard in Isle of Uist. He's part of a chess set. And you can see it's this sort of deranged looking guy biting down on a shield. And in Viking times, berserkers were given like a concoction of drugs, and they were sent into a frenzy, and they were supposed to be terrifying to their opponents. And what was interesting with this piece is that moment, like where the teeth meet the shield. And I use it as a motif to describe a material experience. So again, if you think about the tool used to probe the silo, the squeeze machine, all these things are talking about a kind of like material experience or an expression of a material. And so I use him as a reference because it's sort of bringing together this idea of sculpture as experience and all these different kinds of ideas. So in the show, there were 4 large green objects, some hanging material and some glazed ceramic. And it was the first time I had used ceramic, which was a nightmare, but it was brilliant. I just really got into it, and went to Glasgow Ceramic Studios, and they said, oh, this is never going to work, and I was climbing in and out of kilns, and I was doing like crazy glaze mixes, but anyway, it all did work. And this is an example of a ceramic I made, which is really big. It was about this size, and I managed to get the glaze to match the material, which I mention in case there's any ceramicists in here, because they'll know it's nigh on impossible, and to this day I don't quite know how it happened, but I feel very lucky that it did.
Callum Kelly's work appears on 3 screens. A few days ago, cables were running down the front of the wall in a tangle. Today, the wiring is all neatly hidden. Putting on a show of this scale is a challenge for the curators and gallery staff. Caitlin MacLeod was allowed in to see the installation and found out more about what has been going on behind the scenes.
Upon stepping into the exhibition space, I was greeted by an air of creativity. Through careful and deliberate planning, the top floor of the gallery was being transformed into a treasure trove of striking artworks and thought-provoking sculptures. The installation team were hard at work, laser focused on getting every piece just right, with a lot of up a bit, no, down a touch, slightly to the left. Okay, stop. That's perfect. It was a careful, steady rhythm as they worked their way around each of the walls. The room was filled with the sounds of drills and the industrial hum of a scaffold lift, with the occasional snap of a tape measure. As I made my way through the space, it was hard not to admire the precision that went into getting this exhibition ready for the public, and also the skill of manoeuvring that scaffold lift without bumping into anything. Each wall display was carefully outlined with pencil, marking out exactly where it would be hung. I couldn't help but wonder, how long must it take to erase all those pencil markings afterwards? And more so, how do they not mark the wall? As I made my way around the works that had been unpacked, one painting in particular, The Drying Green by Joyce Cairns, reminded me of home back on the Western Isles. Despite its urban setting, there was something about the sheds on the shore and the fish drying on the washing line, surrounded by all the colourful characters that took me back to the close-knit fishing village on the Isle of Harris where I grew up. In the midst of the hustle and bustle and the endless sheets of bubble wrap, I found Emily Goler, who was able to give some insight into the logistical process of getting this exhibition ready for the public. So how has the sort of setup process been so far?
Yeah, it's been good. It's always busy, but it's gone quite smoothly, I think.
Yeah, it's looking great. Has it been any challenges? Has it been a lot of work?
I think, well, I'm a loans officer, so it's sort of getting everything from A to B. So we've had some loans from a bit further afield. We've had a couple up from London, and then we've got quite a few objects from around the Central Belt in Scotland. So it's just sort of organising the transport to get everything from one place to another and make sure that it's moved carefully and nothing is broken in transit. So yeah, it's always challenging, but nothing from overseas. So.
Have you got a favourite piece so far that's in here?
I do actually. It's the Sandy Fraser, the parrot with all the sort of photographs scattered around it. I just think the skill is incredible. Oh, and I love the David Blythe classical metamorphosis, the statues with the shells.
It's funny that Emily should point out Classical Metamorphosis by David Blythe as one of her favourite collections in the exhibition. It would have to be one of mine as well. In fact, I spent that much time admiring it, I was nearly dragged away. Most of us can appreciate a pretty shell, but a pretty shell blended with a beautiful sculpture? Well, what's not to love about that? What became clear to me was that this exhibition really does have something for everyone. It blends the old and the new, the digital and the traditional. I now find myself with a newfound appreciation for art. And David Blythe, if you're listening, I am a huge fan.
One aspect of Gray's life which has certainly changed over time is the gender balance. The original school was heavily male-dominated, and this continued well into the 20th century. The curators of today's exhibition are attempting to redress the balance by giving particular prominence to 4 pioneering female artists and teachers, and mirrored this by commissioning 4 women to work on the AB postcode to produce new work inspired by the earlier generation.
1885 saw the birth of Gray's School of Art and Science. Judith Winter, one of the curators of the G140 exhibition, helps us navigate the history of these earlier days.
It was founded at a time when, they needed to kind of train artisans in new ways of working with new technologies, new materials. There was a lot of people in the early days of Gray's School of Art that had come from the granite industry or had been in quite traditional craft practices.
Naturally, these were, at the time, male-dominated industries, so in the beginning Gray's was a bit more of a boys' club. Things thankfully didn't stay this way for too long, though. If we fast forward to the 20th century, Judith can tell us a little bit more about what she found in the archives.
During the First World War, there were a lot of women. Actually, you can see them around a table, a faculty. But then I start to realise that art schools, they've kind of got a bit of a reputation, certainly through the 50s, all the way through to the 70s, of being quite male-dominated as locations. And I thought, I wonder if that's different at Gray's. And there's a really wonderful little photograph of the faculty, and all of them are men, apart from one woman in this photograph from that era of 68. And it's Frances Walker, who is the only woman in a sea of the kind of men. Me and Sally Reaper, who's co-curator of this exhibition, we became quite interested in that.
Around this time, in the mid-1960s, enters Joyce Cairns, an extremely notable alum. Here she is, telling us a little bit about those early days of her studies and about one particular educator that inspired her.
When Sylvia Wishart came to the art school, she came in my 3rd year, and we were all excited because, women members, staff, new movement, exciting. And so the first drawings were all like, we'll have to impress Sylvia, a new woman, So I thought, put this drawing, everything but the kitchen sink. And she had the model looking in the mirror, so everything was in it. And she came up behind me and in that lovely Orcadian voice, she said, well, sometimes less is more. And she took a putty rubber and she dabbed out some stuff. It was a total revelation, it's turning lights off and allowing other lights to turn on.
When Joyce returned to Grays in a teaching capacity, however, she quickly discovered that things might not be the same for her as they were for her male counterparts.
Because I remember when I went for the job at Grays, at the interview panel, I was asked, well, you're married, what about children? You wouldn't ask that. And I said, well, I wouldn't have come up here for an interview if that was on my cards. I said, it's not something that I'm considering at all.
But for any aspiring female art educators out there, please do not be alarmed. Things have certainly come a long way since those days. Judith says that women have been integral to Gray's legacy and explains in her own words the lasting impact women have left on this institution.
At Gray's, there are some pioneering women artist educators. Amongst them, we've mentioned Frances Walker, who's in her 90s now. There is also Joyce Cairns, who was the first president of the Royal Academy of Artists, RSA. And she had an incredible impact on Gray's as an artist educator. Carol Gray was an amazing pioneer of pedagogic practice, or ways of working for artists, learning, different learning styles of artists. And then there's Barbara Balmer, who taught the design students and has a very, very unique style and very interesting in terms of portraiture and also the domestic space. Sylvia Wishart, who is no longer with us, but was an amazing artist educator from Orkney, known for her humility. It's where the title of the exhibition, Never Make a Head Bigger Than a Melon, comes from. It's her idiosyncratic advice. So that's been really nice getting to know her through this exploration of where are the women, right? So there's been some really significant women in Gray's.
These 4 incredible female alumni are being particularly honoured through the G140 celebrations. It was announced on International Women's Day, nice touch Grays, that Look Again had selected 4 female Grays alumni in the Aberdeen area to create 4 pieces inspired by the lasting legacies of each of these incredible women. The exhibition, named Performing the Archive #Correspondences, Women's Voices, has been described as a dynamic interplay to bridge the past, present and future. Here is Sally Reaper, the other co-curator, to tell us a little bit more.
When you look at the history and you look at the people that went to art school, it was predominantly male. So all of the teaching staff was predominantly male, and there was 4 pioneering female artist educators that came in. Frances Walker was one of the first. She was one of the first females to teach at Gray's School of Art. So we just felt it was really important because as female educators, the way that they taught was really nurturing, and in a very male-dominated, environment. It was really important for us to kind of highlight that. So it was good that we put out that commission and we got a younger generation of female artists to respond to, as I say, to these pioneering educators. They really did transform how teaching was delivered at Gray's, and they brought in a kind of maybe a sensibility, a kindness, just like a different way of working, which I think worked brilliantly. And they helped shape and define what Gray's was and its next generation, which was in the new building. They kind of defined that. So.
Thank you all so much for coming on this whistle-stop tour of the female legacy of Gray's.
Well, the exhibition doors have been open for an hour or so now. Let's cross back to the gallery and to our reporter Aisha Adebayo.
Hi.
How are things going so far?
It's really building up here now.
You know, when you walk into the gallery, the first thing you notice is the arm of conversation, you know, little pockets of people standing in front of the artworks, pointing things out, swapping memories. Some are leaning in so closely that you can practically hear their breath on the canvas. I mean, there's a lovely flow of people moving from one room to another. And every few minutes, you hear someone go, oh, I remember that. Oh, this looks really nice. Oh, that particular lecturer. So I'll tell you that the atmosphere here is warm, lively, and full of nostalgia.
And who have you been speaking to?
Well, I've just come out of the In Conversation event, which is set up very much like, you know, a stage talk. The Dean, Judith Winter, Matthew, Joyce Cairns, they were seated at the front, and the audience consisted of alumni, students, members of the public. They were all gathered, you know, sitting in theater style, listening closely. The atmosphere was thoughtful and reflective. You know, they were sharing personal stories from their time at Grace, talking about how their work has developed over the years and how the teaching has evolved. A big part of the conversation focused on the creative process, you know, how to support students, how to make the art school environment less intimidating. And they also spoke about how ideas and techniques are passed from one generation to the next. It felt, you know, very intimate, almost like being let into a private conversation between artists who have shaped decades of Gray's history.
That's great. Now, you've had a chance to have a good look around. What's caught your eye?
Oh my God, this exhibition is full of surprises. Earlier, I was standing in front of Derek Ashby's homage to Yuri Gagarin. You know, it's this tall, playful sculpture made entirely from tin cans stacked and arranged on a wooden base. From a distance, it looked like a model rocket. And knowing it's a tribute to the first man in space, you know, it gives this wonderful childlike optimism. Well, a few steps away, the room got quieter and moodier, and then there's Andrew Karstein's I Looked. It's painted on board, and it has this soft, almost dreamlike quality. You can feel the influence of Paris studios and old wooden floors. You know, it's intimate, a bit mysterious. And there's also Ian Mackenzie's Box Grey Square. It is deceptively simple, recycled boards and mirrored paper. But when you stand in front of it, the reflection expands the space so much. It feels like it goes on forever. You know, people keep leaning in, trying to work out where the pieces end and where the room begins. Also tucked along one of the walls is a series of black and white photographs documenting Gray's move from Schoolhill to Garthdee in 1965. Technicians lifting metal letters off the old facade, and the principal watching on. There's small images, but they have so much history in them. They really ground the exhibition in, you know, the story of change and growth. There's also a piece made from steel, concrete, and bamboo by Sydney Bonnet. It's called River Raft and Mountain. You know, it's a mix of heavy and delicate materials. It makes it feel both industrial and organic. It's like a conversation between a fragile raft and a mountain that's been here forever. There's also Arthur Watson's archival vitrine. It's fascinating. It's a whole collection of maquettes, templates, and printmaking materials. When you look at it, you get a sense of, you know, the behind the scenes work that goes into teaching and designing at Grace. It feels like opening a time capsule of the school's creative DNA. There's also one that draws people in. It's called Surfers. You know, it's by Francis Walker. It captures the marks surfers leave on the sands before the tide washes them away. It's delicate, full of movement, a lovely piece about nature, rhythm, and coastline here in the Northeast. You know, all these pieces, they sit together so beautifully. You move from delicate watercolors to steel sculptures to bold video installations. And, you know, it tells such a rich story of Grace across the decades. I'll tell you, that's all the artworks that has caught my attention this morning. That's all that I have from the gallery. Back to you at the studio.
That's great. Thanks, Aisha. One of the best known artists in the show is Alan Watson, who spent 25 years at Grace, both as a student and as a teacher. Ben Lawrenson spoke to Alan about his work on display at the exhibition.
So I'd obviously spent 30 odd years in it. So I guess the commission as well asked me to look right back to the original building when it was first built and the architect's kind of vision. So that was quite interesting in the sense that having known the building for so many years and been in it and experienced lots of different emotions. Of course, the building has been changed a lot. Not maybe externally, you wouldn't see much difference, a little bit, but internally, there's all sorts of things been added and changed and that. So I kind of travelled back in time and tried to reconnect really to that original imagining the building the first day it was opened, you know.
So, I mean, what would you say were some of the things that you really wanted to sort of carry across from obviously Grays in the past to its current state?
Yeah, I think anyone who knows the building, when you approach it, it can appear dark and dense, you know, grey and black. But inside, actually, it's all about space and light and energies, you know, creative energies, imagination. You know, the students are the lifeblood of the college, you know, which I always enjoyed. Every year it changed. It was never, although it was the same physical building, every year there was a different group of students come in, and obviously others had left, and it was never the same. So yeah, that was, I just brought in colour really in that sense to suggest that sense of life and energy. And it's also quite a disorientating building, although it's very simple. It's a U-shape. When people first enter it, it's quite confusing. So these models are a combination of flat two-dimensional representation and then three-dimensional depth. Just add that sort of little bit of confusion, really. That's kind of what I was aiming for.
And you spoke about, obviously, when you go inside the building, it's still full of this fun, colourful atmosphere. Would you say that the innovation and the quality of work is still like, how would you rate it still today?
Well, I've been left 9 years, but it's still the same. I mean, when I first started teaching in about 94, 95 to when I left in 2016, in some ways the students are still the same, you know. There's not a typical student, but there are definitely types of student. Yeah, it's just an exciting place to be in terms of their journey that they're learning, and you can see them change, and you know, worlds open up to them. And I always used to mostly teach first year, because I found that the most satisfying. First years come in and they maybe think they know what art school is, and they maybe think they know what they want to do. And then first year throws that all up in the air, and they discover things that they never knew about, and that's always a lovely thing, like, you know. So I miss that. That's the one thing I miss, is that sharing that sort of sense of development, you know.
And what would you say an art school means to you, and also just this amazing anniversary, I suppose?
Yeah, art schools are just amazing places in terms of creativity, but it's more than that. I mean, it's a lot of people have an image of an art school as people throw paint around and that, but it's hard work and discipline and process, and you know, it's a real education over and above maybe the technical, the material skills. The conceptual development and your understanding of the world, and all of that kind of is all rolled up in there. Not for every student, because every student finds their own pathway. And you can have, you know, when I ran the sculpture department, we maybe had a dozen students, and all of them could be dealing with completely different things. The common ground was a sort of sculptural object or film or that. But in terms of their starting points, their interests, you know, that could be anything. And I think that's a very healthy thing, you know. And I think it's a shame that art schools sometimes are just seen as this pigeonholed into a kind of, oh, that's all that happens at art school. But it's incredible. You know, people deal with science and philosophy and ecology and politics and economics and obviously gender and, you know, it's just everything. And that's, I think, you know, doing tutorials is always amazing, because from one student to the next, you could be talking about this one minute and then the next year into something else, you know. And the exhibition, the celebration is wonderful. It's having studied at Grays, it becomes part of your DNA, you know. So seeing this sort of trajectory and historical progression is wonderful.
And what's one thing that you hope people visiting the exhibition take away from it, maybe through your own work or just through everything in general?
I'm guessing here, but I think in Aberdeen a lot of people know Grays and they maybe have a sort of image of it, and most people, I guess, don't visit, and quite a few might go to the degree show. So I just hope it encourages people to maybe certainly visit the degree show and see the art school as a place they can go to, and I think see that art's a key part of Aberdeen, and design.
You're listening to G140 Radio with me, Mackenzie Heaton. The day has opened with formal speeches at the Cowdrey Hall. Councillor Martin Gregg spoke for Aberdeen City Council and reflected on Gray's role as a community.
To warmly welcome you to Aberdeen Art Gallery this cold winter's day. It is a very warm welcome that we are extending to you this morning. It's great to gather here together to celebrate the 140th anniversary of Gray's School of Art. And it's great to be able for us to host this dedicated display of artworks to mark and to reflect upon 14 decades of creative output from our much loved and respected local art school. My name is Martin Gregg, and I am Aberdeen City Council's lead on the arts, and it is indeed a pleasure for me to be here in front of you. Quadraginta Centennial is indeed a very special historic milestone in the calendar, and I think that it's an appropriate time for us to look back, but also to look forward. And I'm very much looking forward to the panel discussion, which I hope we'll be able to develop some of those ideas about the future of Gray's and the city's involvement and its love of the arts. I think that this exhibition, which is upstairs and that you'll see in a very few moments, is an excellent opportunity for us to gather and to salute the artists and the designers who have formed what I think is a very distinctive Gray's tradition and identity. I think it might not always be obvious, but there is surely some special spirit working through Gray's history that's formed some special distinctive ethos. So this is a time when we can take time and pause and look forward to the ongoing future thriving of creative imagination, which Gray's nurtures and releases amongst, in particular, younger generations. Gray's is our local art school, and we are indeed very, very, very proud of this important institution. But Gray's has an international reputation, as well as being proudly cherished and valued as our local art school. This area very definitely appreciates and is very grateful for all of the work that our local art school does. It is a powerhouse of artistic energy, productivity, and of discovery. Over the years, Gray's students and teachers have contributed strongly to form our local Aberdeen identity and our unique sense of place. And in turn, the local environment and the special characteristics of this area and its people have undoubtedly impacted on the personality of Gray's and its creative practice. Art school and place have influenced each other. They are mutually supportive communities. Gray's is rooted in this area, and it has served us so well. And I'm confident that the interdependencies which have worked through history between place and school will surely continue to develop strongly into the future for the benefit of all. The art school's crucial and fundamental link to civic life of the city, I think, will always exist. It's something that is cherished. And I think it's worth noting that that strong connection between city and school was literally built into the relationship right from the very start in a very visible way. Because the city's public art gallery and Grays both opened in 1885 in adjoining buildings here in Schoolhill. Obviously this year they share their 140-year birthdays together. But the two institutions benefited from the very deliberate decision of physically interrelating the two buildings. And the reason for that was so that artists and designers could operate in synergy with the art gallery. So before the move to Garthdee, there was that very visible, active, physical connection between art gallery and school. And obviously if you go outside, the Bridge of Sighs at the front of the building is a very visual link where we can see how students moved freely with that civic art collection, interacting very positively. And I think we can consider that bridge, although it's still there in a very physical way, it also represents a symbol of our very lively, joint, ongoing commitment to work together. It's an important responsibility that we share of nurturing expertise and enjoyment of art and design. So the partnership between the civic side and the art education side is important, it's vital, and it's ongoing. Grays helps to keep our city vibrant and attractive as a European city of culture. And over the many decades, it has always strongly and vividly supported new generations of students. And I think that vital, eternal responsibility of nurturing the creative talent of young people, liberating their imagination, helping them to be inventive, that's right at the heart of what Grays and art schools do, and that's what we're going to continue to do together into the future. Last year, we celebrated here in the Art Gallery the splendid creative output of three of the artists who are connected with Grays, three of Scotland's most prestigious artists. It was a deep joy to present work here in the Art Gallery, work by Ian Howard, Lennox Dunbar, and the wonderful Arthur Watson. So the gallery rightly has the happy task of showcasing and celebrating local artists associated with Grays, such as these. And I'm sure you will have your own preferences and favourites, and you'll be able to enjoy and just revel in the emotional enjoyment of the works upstairs in the exhibition. It's a pleasure to host this exhibition and to offer civic space to Grays to sustain the very important partnership work which we have. It is a powerful relation between city and school, and we want to keep that going. So I'm very pleased to open this excellent new exhibition showcasing art and design works produced by the Grays community over their first 14 decades. I'd like to thank the Grays team for organising this wonderful and very eloquent display, and I'd also like to thank the Art Gallery team for enabling and actioning this exhibition. I wish the event every success. Enjoy.
Good afternoon. You're listening to G140 Radio. The time has just gone 12:40. I'm Ewan Gary. We've been hearing from artists, exhibitors and graduates. You've just heard from Councillor Martin Greig. For Grace School of Art, the co-curator of the exhibition, Judith Winter, reflected on the anniversary and the work which went into setting up the exhibition.
So, good morning and welcome to everybody. I can see already, as everybody came into the room, that ecology of practice, this years and years of people who have these connections and networks. And so I want to really say something. I'm the co-curator of this exhibition with the wonderful Sally Reaper. Sally, would you just take it off? Part of that team is Claire Bruce as well, and so it's a huge honour, really, to speak to so many people who have shaped and supported or been shaped by this artistic community connected with Grays School of Art. Today almost marks the end of a remarkable and very intense install period. So I can hope that you can imagine that I feel slightly uneasy about revealing too much before you really have a chance to truly experience the exhibition yourselves. I don't like standing here. I have a great privilege standing here, but I'm sure you can imagine also that the process of it that kept circulating, or the question, the essential question that kept circulating in Sally and my mind was, how do you do justice to 140 years of an art school? How do you honour the voices, the spaces, the teaching traditions, and the creative shifts that have shaped generations? We wanted to avoid very much being over nostalgic, while we still recognise the significance, the real significance of and the emotional charge that history carries. Okay, sorry. From the start, we knew we needed to say something about what makes an art school distinct. Its atmosphere, its ethos, its community of practice. So for me, this quickly became a project that also related to my abiding interest and work and research, PhD, fascination in the transformation and the value of art schools and how they shape the future. And I think I need to say that that's very important at this moment in time, to understand history, but also how that history is being constructed, narrated, and remembered. And that thinking sits right at the heart of the exhibition you're about to see, and this should be an exhibition that reveals something of the genealogy of the art school, why it matters, how ideas are passed from generation to generation. So we've also already heard something of this remarkable 140-year history, but it is a narrative, it's a story that Grays School of Art welcomed its first students in Schoolhill in 1885, almost at the exact same day as we're all here gathered. And since then, Grays has been one of Scotland's 4 original art schools, alongside Dundee, Edinburgh and Glasgow. And it's been a major contributor to the evolution of art school education. So from the beginning, Grays developed a really distinctive ethos, centred, I think, on studio practice, workshop culture, learning through making, and also pioneering practice-led research. It also, these qualities have really shaped generations, and it still sits at the core, I think, of the school's identity. And I can't wait to hear this conversation about how that is evolving in the future as well, and hearing the kind of panel discussion of that. The original school was deeply connected to Aberdeen's civic and cultural fabric, to the Mechanics Institute in Market Street, and to the gallery. And the post-war period brought really new ambitions. Under the head of school, Ian Fleming, Grays moved to the purpose-built modernist building in Garthdee, designed by Michael Schuon, and it was influenced not by the past, but on how to shape the future. It was informed, as you'll see, by the ethos of Mies van der Rohe, opening in 1966. Grays on the banks of the River Dee signalled continuity and renewal, an art school with a modernist heart, but also with a strong sense of its own past. The three archival images that we begin the exhibition with show this hand-forged Grays Roman lettering being carried from Schoolhill and the Granite City to the new building. And this simple act became something symbolic for us. It captures what it means to take identity forward, to listen to the past whilst embracing change. And I think it's very important that we say that our approach at the centre of this exhibition lies in a concern with how the past is constructed and how the narratives are taken forward by future generations. We had a conversation with many extant studio staff who studied at Grays and were taught by those who had shaped the art school in the late 1960s and 70s. We read countless letters, correspondences, teaching notes, mined the photographic archives of the Art and Heritage Collection, and we also wanted to approach the exhibition as a real living archive. And the 68 prospectus helped us to make the selections. So, in time, when art schools everywhere are under pressure, we wanted to spotlight mainly how artist-led teaching, workshop culture, and ways of seeing continue to shape that ecology, and that's what matters. And the research and the propositions that kept surfacing as we looked at this material, and as I got to know this family, really, was the importance of the art school environment, 1. 2, how artists as teachers pass on ways of seeing. And 3, why art school identity really still matters. So I'm sure many of you are also wondering about the title and the subtitle, Never Make a Head Bigger Than a Melon. Well, it is advice that was given by Sylvia Wishart in a drawing class, so we're told. It's a story, humorous, slightly ambiguous, a little bit nonsensical in some ways. And it resurfaced in the painting by Andrew Cranston, May 1968, Grays School of Art. And whilst it may sound light-hearted, it points to proportion, humility, and attentiveness, qualities at the heart of art school teaching. Metaphorically, I think, as well, it does something that Grays does. It felt very Aberdonian. Literally, don't let your head or ego get out of proportion. And it captures both the playfulness and the seriousness of making art. And it felt like the perfect lens through which to view the school's history. Okay, so I'm now actually going to pass over to the panel. But before I do that, and I'm sorry that this is going to take a little bit of time, it's extremely important that I show some thanks to everyone involved in the exhibition. And then we can listen to this wonderful, I can relax and listen to this wonderful panel discussion. So I want to express our thanks for me and Sally. This is on behalf of me, Sally, and the Look Again team, to recognise the people whose work, generosity and care made this exhibition even possible. The entire Aberdeen Art Gallery curatorial team. A particular thanks to Helen Fothergill and all of the team behind the scenes at Aberdeen Art Gallery, and to the last dean, Libby Curtis, who started the process through a conversation several years ago. We specifically want to thank, though, who've really helped us with this exhibition, Deirdre Grant. So I'm just going to go Deirdre Grant, Emily Golan, Jason Williamson, Chris Bird, Ben Martin. These were the technicians and the whole technical team, many of whom studied at Grays. So can I just give a thanks to them? Exhibitions simply do not happen with this level, without this level of care and empathy, and I feel really humbled to be with all of you today, and I hope that I've done, that together we've done justice and we've started the process. Being guest curators has been challenging, but we really want to thank Aberdeen team who welcomed our approach and trusted our openness. We're enormously grateful also to Grace School of Art at Robert Gordon University for enabling us to do this. There are too many people to thank individually, but a few are essential to name. Claire Bruce for the identity, Alan Watson for thinking with us about the layout of the exhibition and also contributing in such a special commission. Michael Agnew and Doug Cocker for a wonderful commission but also support throughout the process. David Blythe for tireless commitment and just kindness through the process. Callum Kelly for developing an archive, Bloomberg interpretive material, having conversations with artists that's helped us to develop a kind of living archive. Michael Visocki for framing so much of the work that was in the RGU Art and Heritage Collection. And a very special thank you to George Shane, Robert Gordon University Art and Heritage Collection, the custodian. It's no exaggeration to say that George sustained the collection's narratives for many years, and as someone who arrived new to Aberdeen, he really helped me to understand this context. And we worked together for several years before this exhibition even began on a project entitled Sense of Place with students. So I also thank students for helping us to develop the ideas. George has chosen this moment to retire. And although he cannot be with us today, we wish him the very best in his retirement. And I'm sure that everybody else here would like to do that and thank him for keeping these narratives alive. So just a quick. Okay, so finally, I do have to thank our advisory team. Dan was about a week into his job, and I think I said, we're doing this major exhibition. And I just really appreciate you leading an advisory team and placing your full trust in us. It means such a lot. And finally, there are also supporters and lenders to thank whose contributions expanded the ambition and scope of the project. So we had generous support from Creative Scotland, Aberdeen City Council, Metro Imaging, the Royal Scottish Academy celebrating its 200th anniversary, Ingleby Gallery, the Doig family, the Peter Doig family collection, the Sterling Smith Art Gallery and Museum, the Hammock collection, and a host of private collectors. So please, if there's one thing I'd ask is this is such an important moment to celebrate and to think about art school futures. So spread the word about the exhibition. We hope you enjoy today and hopefully return with others. We'll continue to expand the programme through to April. So including off-site projects, events, and a closing forum, and so I've heard a party as well in spring. So we hope to see some of you back for that as well. It's been an honour, really an honour to feel a little bit like an outsider who's learning about the context in which I'm working. And I've felt so welcomed by this community, and I feel so much part of its material now, and I hope you'll feel the same when you look around. So without further ado, I am now going to hand over to this panel. Dan Allen, our Dean of School. Joyce needs no introduction to you all, but I do think that I have to say, we've really invited you here today because of the extraordinary commitment to studio practice that has shaped generations of painters. How widely admired you are for breaking new ground as the first woman president of the Royal Scottish Academy, And we just thank you for being here and joining this panel. It's a really important moment.
Thank you.
Michael Agnew is a wonderful colleague at Grays, and I think it is fair to say that he has kept the joy in studio teaching. He cares deeply about all our students. He also studied at Grays and was taught by Joyce, and then went on to the Royal College of Art and was elected in RSA in 2008. And I think that it's just wonderful having this two generations kind of having this correspondence. There is one other person I'd like to thank before this panel discussion starts, and that's Frances Walker. Frances Walker in the front row, who actually, Frances and Joyce have both been extremely wonderful at helping us also select some contemporary artists to correspond with their works. And hopefully you will see that work in the exhibition, and we can talk about that during panel discussion. So, without further ado, please welcome the panel.
That was a speech from Judith Winter about the impact Grays has had on her career and how important it is to Aberdeen. I'm sat here now with the co-creator. I have the co-curator of the exhibition, Sally Reaper, on the line.
Hello.
How's the exhibition going, Sally?
How's it going? It's going brilliant, actually. We're absolutely delighted at the response. You know, we had a fantastic opening launch event and conversation, which was just joyous to hear current head of painting and Joyce Cairns, who obviously taught painting to myself. So it was a real privilege, actually, to be in the room with so many past and present students. So yeah, it's just been a joy right now at the moment, just seeing how the public are responding to the show. And there's just such a lovely spirit in the galleries right now.
It must be a lovely feeling. How long has the development of the exhibition been? A couple of sleepless nights over it?
Definitely. We're on day 8 right now, so I definitely have a few bags under my eyes. It's been long days, but, you know, very gratifying days. You know, it takes a village to put on an exhibition, and I think that's what we have to remember. So much people put so much effort and care into kind of installing the works in order for it to look effortless, and right now it really does look effortless in the galleries.
Oh, it sounds absolutely brilliant. How important is exhibitions like this to not only Aberdeen Art Gallery, but the larger local area?
It's really important because I think it talks so much about who we are as a community, our identity in terms of where we're placed here in the northeast of Scotland. I think it's important for the next generation of artists, but also just for the public. I think we forget that, you know, there's these powerful institutions in the city, but we have to remind ourselves as residents that they belong to us. You know, these collections that are like hidden away maybe in like, you know, stores and stuff, they all belong to us. And it's just so important for them to come out of their cases, be put on the walls for the kind of the people of the city to enjoy them, and for them to kind of connect with their kind of DNA with their past and how it will potentially inform their future. So we're just, honestly, it's just a delight to see these works on the wall. They're absolutely remarkable. Things from the 1800s and how they look contemporary because they're kind of like positioned alongside contemporary work that's been done just recently. So yeah, it's just really important for the city to feel a sense of belonging, and I do believe that Grays 140, this exhibition, does that.
Well, no, it's absolutely brilliant to hear for you. I know you're very busy today, so I'll let you go and get yourself a big glass of wine tonight as a congratulations. Well done for pulling it all together.
Thank you so much for doing this. We're so grateful. Thank you.
Well, thanks for having us. That was Sally Reaper, the co-curator of the exhibition there. Our reporters down at the gallery have been asking the public about their connections to Grays and the impact it has on them.
I have a connection. I was a student of Grays School of Art. Those were in the days when they were just next door at Schoolhill before they moved up to Garthdee. I was a student from about roughly 1961 to 68. That was my studying there.
My name is Callum Innes, and I'm an artist working in Edinburgh and Oslo, but I went to Grays over 40 years ago.
I'm Kevin Henderson. I studied with Callum, or
around about the same
I was
time.
a year above you.
He was a year above me.
I wonder if there would be a few familiar faces there.
This is the first time that we've been back
I know,
together
and we share
in
the flat.
Aberdeen for over 30 years, so it's quite special.
I briefly attended Grays back in 2012, I think. I didn't finish my course there, but I had a fantastic time. So.
Are there any specific pieces, pictures that you're hoping to see today in the exhibition?
I submitted a photograph of a painting I had done in my first year at Grays of what they call the silversmithing room, where the metalwork was done.
But there's a couple of works upstairs of mine which I was curious to see after so many years.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see them. I've got no idea what else is on there though, because I've not had a look around yet. So
I think I like David Blythe's work.
Yes.
Especially the sculptures with the shells.
Yeah.
But then just on the other side of this, those three like pillars and everything, I think that's really good. But there's just, again, art is so individual, isn't it? That everything that you look at has something very remarkable to appreciate, you know. So.
As I say, I would be coming anyway, and I'm sure I'll see some of my fellow students' work. I'd be disappointed if I didn't. But it'll bring back memories. That's a long time. That's more than 50 years anyway, I think. And as I say, I started at the Schoolhill Art School, and then my last year was spent up at Garthdee when they moved.
So you experienced the change in campus?
The change, yes. We were quite happy up at Garthdee, but I think we missed being in the centre, main attraction being the Harriet Street Bar, just round the corner there. And of course Mars isn't with easy reach. It was a wee bit of a desert out there, comparative, rather dry desert.
That was some thoughts and feelings from the public at the gallery. We'll now go back to another archive talk from the Guest at Grace series.
The sublime nature of the Great Wall of China has appealed to me for a very long time. My image of China as a child was always that I had to go to the Great Wall of China. And it's great to be actually back in Aberdeen, because that inspiration actually came from the only Chinese restaurant in Aberdeen, the Great Wall. I think it's on Bridge Street, and they used to have this giant copper relief of the Great Wall, and I think I went there first when I was about 9 or my 10th birthday, and went, oh my goodness, I've got to go there. So, you know, inspiration can come from some very mundane or unusual sources. So eventually in 2015, did I say 2010? I actually got to, keep my dates right. I got to China. I was the recipient of a scholarship from the Royal Scottish Academy, and so I did a lot of walking on the wall, walking a section of the wall and then pulling out of my pocket some special acetate, like floppy acetate that was rolled up, and then doing a dry point drawing directly onto the acetate and then putting it back in my pocket, walking another, kilometre till there was another viewpoint and drawing it. Printmaking is probably second only to painting in as my pictorial passions, as it were. So I found I needed some way to get across that sort of infinite line. And I suppose that the Great Wall appealed to me because as a kind of fairly linear artist who has drawing as their base, then the Great Wall is just one or two very long lines across the country. And it sort of described the actual topography of that area of China. However, the Great Wall was not this wonderful remote place that I always expected it to be, in this sublime empty landscape. And this little painting here called The Yellow Bus has got the motorway, which was carved right through one of the most ancient parts of the wall, one of the most historic parts at Gubakao. And so this painting was trying to get the sense of the wall, which you can see disappearing off, and then the road going through it. I've always been extraordinarily interested in Chinese ink painting as a form. And ink painting is only using ink and paper, as I'm sure you know, and water. But it's actually called painting and not drawing. And obviously, as you know, if you worked in ink on paper in a European sense, it would be called an ink drawing, even if it was done with wash. So I was always fascinated at this kind of melding between drawing and painting becoming one thing and the whole philosophy behind it. But when I went to China, I found it very, very difficult to actually access the information about ink painting and about the traditional ink painting practice. So one of the things I did was try to put across my response to the landscape was simply by finding a whole bunch of postcards of ink paintings and then updating them a little. So you can see this is a series of postcards where I've added a few roads, modern roads cutting through the mountains, which is kind of how it looks when you're over there at the moment. So these are some of my very first appropriations, and they were simply worked on with postcards and ink paintings. But it was a kind of homage to the skill of the early ink painters, and these are 15th century ink paintings, and you can buy these little books of postcards there. And that was kind of my starting point. But in actual fact, the landscape is truly extraordinary. And this is in the southwest of China, in a place near Guilin. And you can actually see that those mountains, which almost look like a fantasy mountain that one would recognize from ink paintings, actually exist. And these are limestone karst mountains. And this is a road that goes between them. And I remember hiring a bicycle in that area, and I said, but there's no gears on this bike. How am I going to get anywhere? Because I imagined we were going to go like this, you know. And they said, no, the roads are completely flat. So you have an eroded, flat landscape below, and it's a bit like a giant chess set of mountains, absolutely unique and so different from our landscape, which I found the difference is always inspiring. This is Guilin itself. So you can see that the mountains rear up right up against villages, towns and farmland. And I found that I got a kind of, by traveling both in the city and the country, I got a feel for the country. And as I'm sure you know, China is vast. I've done a fair bit of traveling, and I felt that I needed to travel every way, whether it's by bicycle, by train, by car, by bus, and I even travelled here by bamboo boat down the River Lee. And I started trying to do my ink paintings actually whilst it was like a 5-hour journey down the river, and this amazing passing landscape of limestone karst mountains, I just painted and painted and painted all the way, and they became the core for quite a lot of my work. It looks fairly isolated and empty, but just to give you an idea of how well known this landscape is, that is a photograph of a 20 yuan note, and there is the actual mountains in the background that it's depicting. So this is a landscape that has been painted for over 2,000 years by artists. It is now one of the key beauty spots or wonders of the world in China. And the place is actually thick with tourists, and the river is not as alive as you think. There's very few fish left in the river, and the volume of both Chinese tourists and foreign tourists is pretty high. And just to give you an idea that China has always been a crowded place, of course, as a tourist, I went to visit Xi'an and the Terracotta Army, which was created by the first emperor of China in 2010 BC, Qin Shi Huang. He was the first emperor who actually unified China, but in the end he actually almost bankrupted the country preparing for his immortality. And this is actually only one fragment of his preparation for immortality that he did. So he wanted basically everyone to go with him when he died, and many living people were buried with him as well. But what it does do, the legacy of this discovery, which was only made, I think, in the mid-70s, is it shows just the level of sophistication of the crafts, the artwork, the bronze casting, which was probably 1,500 years ahead of European bronze casting, and so on. So here we have the vast hordes and armies from 2010 BC of a very sophisticated society. But here, catching the train into Xi'an, this is the train station, and it was quite strange this is actually the train station, the old train station in Xi'an, and it's as crowded as the crypts and the graves of the first emperor. And when I was there in 2000, this is actually 2011, and the old train system was probably being used more. However, when I was there, just to give you a sense of contrast, this is the station of the high-speed rail system, the bullet train in China. And this is the station in Nanjing. And you can see it's this sort of perfect, shiny world. Or you could eat your dinner off the floor, it's so clean. And but it's an awful lot more expensive. You can see it's almost like an airport or something. It's certainly not how we imagine a train station to be. And although the station is perfect and it can whisk you from Beijing to Nanjing and on to Shanghai in about half the time it takes in the old trains, what I found outside the window, I thought I was so excited because I thought I'm going to see outside of Beijing and I'm going to see the countryside, you know. So I looked out of the window and this was what I saw. I created this ink painting based on a little tiny drawing in my notebook. I always draw when I look out of train windows. And I called it the folded earth because the pollution on the Yangtze plain was so intense that I couldn't see further than half a mile in on this flat landscape. So it was almost like the actual landscape had folded along the horizon, a little bit like it is today with the mist and the fog out there coming up on the train from Edinburgh today. However, I think mostly it's just mist, but that level of pollution, of obscuration that exists, not constantly, but a huge amount of the time, was something that I felt I had to address in my work when I went there. But I didn't just travel by train. I created pictures of my own experiences, like I say, the tourist and the traveller, the consumer and the artist, and all these four roles kind of crossed over. And so quite a lot of my pictures were created looking out of a taxi window. So one step removed from being amongst the Chinese people. It's very hard to get over to the other side of that. If you look in the rear view mirror of this little ink painting, you can see the skyscrapers in the rear view mirror and the mountains in the foreground. And I was just starting to become aware of the dichotomy and the contrast between one place to another. Here's another journey in a back of a taxi. This is a Shanghai taxi. And what they used to have is, you know that stuff that they have in the windows, which is like a blue filter at the top. It always made the sky look blue even when it's polluted, so I kind of had to put that in. And those are my little nervous pink knees, you know. The map open up like this. So I was a bit of a nervous traveller in Shanghai. It was a bit scary, I have to say.
I'm Callum Lewis. You're listening to G140 Radio, a pop-up radio station celebrating 140 years of Gray's School of Art, and that was an archive interview with Kate Downey. Over at the Art Gallery, invited guests have been enjoying some informal discussions on the sofa between Professor Dan Allen and Michael Agnew. We've been listening in to the best of their conversation.
I'm going to start by taking you back just over 2 years ago, when I came for an interview for the Dean post here at Gray's Robert Gordon University, and I got off the plane on the morning of my interview, and I got into a taxi, and I thought, he's not going to know where Gray's School of Art is, so I said, could you take me to Robert Gordon University, please? Sure enough, he said, oh, Robert Gordon University is a great university. We're really blessed in Aberdeen for having two fantastic universities, and the universities are really important to the city. I thought, crikey, that's an impressive introduction to Robert Gordon University. So he drove me towards the university, and as we got close to the university, he said, whereabouts at Robert Gordon University would you like dropping off? I said, well, actually, I'm going to Gray's School of Art. He said, Gray's School of Art's amazing. He said, we're so proud of Gray's School of Art in this city. I thought, is this executive planting this taxi driver on me at this moment? I said, have you got family that have studied at Gray's? And he said, oh no. He said, no, there's no creativity in my family at all. And I just sat there awkwardly for the next sort of minute as he drove me towards Gray's thinking, what is this place? This is quite extraordinary for a taxi driver to speak so highly of an art school and its contribution to the city. And I thought, I better just tighten my tie up and have a really good stab at this interview. And so I guess as an introduction, I'm really curious about what it is that's so special about Gray's School of Art. And I'm going to just open the conversation, if it's okay, with yourself, Michael. Just saying, what's the magic and what's contributed to Gray's reputation within the city?
It's a big question, isn't it? It's a very, very big question, and it goes across many kind of facets. I think that taxi driver was a good move on our part for a start. there's one thing I'd think about. I think I always come back to the people and the teachers and most importantly the students as well make our school very unique. In the context of Scotland, I think we're just far enough out of that kind of central beltism to give us our own uniqueness. The building is unique. There's something about the building at Gray's, the Michael Shue and Mies van der Rohe collaboration, let's call it that, gets under your skin. I came here in 1986, would you believe? So next year I'll be here 40 years. And funnily enough, every time I've had a pint too many in town and I need to get a taxi home, the taxi driver will say to me, Are you working in oils? And I say, no, I work in acrylics, because I've been here so long, and I see myself as a Tory loon, and there's certain students who laugh at me, Aberdeen students who laugh at me about that. But I think it's infectious. I think there's a kind of desire to be in that building and be around the people and be around those studio cultures that are embedded, and I think have always been embedded in the Gray's philosophy. As well as being taught by Joyce, I was taught by Lennoxton Bar, the wonderful Ruth Beersworth, Sandy Fraser, Doug Cocker. There was a fine art ecology at the time I was being taught, and we've came full circle now. We're now back at that again. Uniqueness in the Scottish context is seen at the RSA as well, for instance, in the student shows, the new contemporary shows. I think our students are embedded in trying to develop their own languages around the region, the hinterland, and about their own voices. And I've always felt that there's been a wonderful support and camaraderie between staff and students. Maybe in my day, there was maybe lecturers speaking down the way to you, and you were a student and you had your place. But I never felt that with Joyce and Lennox, and they made me very welcome into this kind of ecology, and it's that kind of idiosyncratic, personal approach, which I think we do better than most art schools in Scotland. Some art schools are sink or swim. We throw out the life belt.
And now back to the gallery, where we are joined by a guest. If I could just ask the guest's name, that'd be fantastic.
Oh, hi. Yeah, no, this is Millie. We're just, I'm Millie Cumming. We're just here to have a little yap about sort of the opening and how things have been going on here.
Oh, perfect. Have you had a chance to see the exhibition?
Sorry. Oh, sorry, guys. We can't quite hear you. Is everything all right?
Hello, can you hear me?
Hello, guys?
Hello?
I'm not sure if it's us or not right now. I'm hearing nothing.
Apologies,
Oh,
we're
that's
just
okay.
experiencing technical difficulties currently. Just read it. 140 years of artist-led education at Grace School of Art is being celebrated in a major new exhibition at Aberdeen Art Gallery, featuring works by over 50 artists, all of whom studied or worked at Grace. The exhibition focuses on the art school environment, on what artists teach, how ideas are passed from generation to generation, and how studio culture continues to evolve. Since opening on 16th of November 1995, Grace School of Art has developed a distinctive ethos centered on curiosity, experimentation, and a deep commitment to making, painting, drawing, printing, printmaking, sculpture, film, video, photography, ceramics, and textiles are all on display in the exhibition. There are works by important artist educators such as James Cowie, Robert Henderson Blythe, Sylvia Wishart, Francis Walker, Joyce Cairns, Fred Stephen, and Ainsley Yule, alongside contributions that correspond with these works by current staff and alumni including David Blythe, Andrew Cranston, Callum Innes, and Taco Tal. Artists and archival material are drawn from the collections of Aberdeen Archives Gallery and museums, RGU Art and Heritage Collections, the Royal Scottish Academy, and from private lenders. The exhibition's subtitle, Never Make a Head Bigger Than a Melon, recalls advice given to Gray's drawing students by Arcadian painter and educator Sylvia Wishart. Both practical and metaphorical, generations of students were guided by this humorous lesson in proportion, humility, and attention. Well, that seems like the perfect place to leave our show today. Thank you very much to Sally and Judith, and don't forget, there are G140 events planned all the way through to April next year. G140 was researched, recorded, and presented by students on the BA Honours and MSc Journalism courses. They were Ben Lawrenson, Isa Adebayo, Xander Steele, Ewan Jerry, Millie Cumming, Mackenzie Heedon, Caitlin MacLeod, Lucy Charteris, Erin Duncan, Hugo Lightning Youngs, Tom Mitchell Sadler, Hayley Gilbride, Ella Henderson, Chandra Chatterjee, Ren Dimmer, and me, Callum Lewis. Thank you very much for listening, and from G140 Radio, goodbye.